Today, we're going to be talking about how you can make the most out of your emotional experiences. So, we're going to be focusing on how we utilize emotions, and we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence, emotions and aging, emotional coping, and then storytelling. So, let's start off with emotional intelligence. So, a lot of research has been focused on IQ or intelligence, and the theory was that IQ is what really leads to success in life. And so this started to change as we talked about in the previous lectures, and they sort of realized that there's no strong correlation with your IQ and your success. And so in the 1990s, the psychologist Daniel Goldman, he started to hypothesize about this emotional intelligence and he started to advocate for this in the press. And so this is really where emotional intelligence came from. And so there's three components to emotional intelligence, which is your appraisal and expression of emotions, your regulation, and your utilization of emotions. And so in this theory, there's four branches of skills, and in each branch there's an additional four skills, making 16 total skills. And notice how I said skills because these are things that you can learn and improve upon. So, in the skills of emotional intelligence, there's perceiving emotions, your ability to identify emotions in psychological and physical states, so in your body and in your mind, your ability to identify emotions in other people, express those emotions accurately, and discriminate between authentic and inauthentic emotions. And so another skill is utilizing emotions to facilitate thought, and this can be redirecting and prioritizing thinking on the basis of associated feelings, generating emotions to facilitate judgment and memory, and capitalizing on mood changes to appreciate multiple points of view, and using emotional states to facilitate problem solving and creativity. Another big skill in emotional intelligence is understanding emotions. Your ability to understand relationships among various emotions, perceive the cause and consequence of these emotions, and understand complex feelings, emotional blends, and contradictory states. And then understanding transitions among emotions. And then the final skill in this theory of emotional intelligence is your ability to manage emotions, being open to feeling both pleasant and unpleasant emotions, monitoring and reflecting on your emotions, and engaging, prolonging, and detaching from an emotional state, and then being able to manage emotions in yourself and others. And so now we sort of talked about emotional intelligence, but why do we care about emotional intelligence? Well, we know that your emotional center of your brain is vital for making decisions and can help guide you to make decisions that are the best for yourself. And so, if you have strong emotional intelligence skills, you'll be able to understand others, what they're feeling, understand yourself and what you're feeling, and you'll be able to use this information to make better choices in your own life and hopefully improve your relationships with others by being able to understand them better. And then, if you're lacking emotional intelligence, you can always figure out which of your friends have emotional intelligence and you can try and to do what they do and try and learn some of the skills from them. And then if you're really don't have high emotional intelligence at all, you can always consult with your friends who may have higher emotional intelligence to sort of read the room and figure out what's going on, maybe in yourself or maybe in others. And so now I want to sort of shift gears and talk about emotion and aging. So, how does our emotions change as we age? Well, there's a social emotional selectivity theory, which states that as we age, from the process of aging, I think we realize that we have less time in our lives. And so the theory is that we focus more on the good stuff as we get older and we start to disregard the negative. And so this is shown in tests where older individuals are faster to attenuate to positive stimuli, meaning they incorporate the positive stimuli into their nervous system faster. And so another consequence of aging is that we focus more on here and now goals as opposed to long-term goals. And we have this reduced poignancy, which is a fancy word for meaning any time that something is traumatic to us and so causes a big emotional distress. We have a reduced stress to that stimuli. And so now we're going to talk about emotional coping. And historically, emotional coping has been sort of looked down upon, but there's actually been a lot of confounding research, meaning that there's other variables that caused us to think this. One of the main variables is that in these studies where they were measuring emotional coping, they realized that there was a lot of self-deprecation in the studies. So for instance, you would get a question like this: I blame myself for being too emotional. Do you agree with this? That would correlate with you having more emotional coping. Or I get upset at myself and let my emotions out. Now, if you realize these two questions are kind of set up in a confounding way because you have to self-deprecate to be able to agree with these. So people can be they can be emotional, but they may not blame themselves for being too emotional, and they can get upset and let their emotions out. But maybe they don't actually get upset, or they just let their emotions out. So this is one of the confounding variables in this research. And so for a while, it was thought that emotional coping, there's no link between emotional coping and good outcomes, and that emotional coping actually led to poor outcomes, but it may have been that we were actually looking at self-deprecation based on these questions. So they've sort of invalidated the link between emotional coping and poor outcomes. So now, how does emotional coping actually work? What is emotional coping? Well, there's two major ways that people can emotionally cope, which is emotional processing, which is sort of realizing your feelings and accepting that they're valid, and taking time to figure out what you're feeling and delving deep into understanding them. Those are some examples of emotional processing. The other form of emotional coping is emotional expression, where you express your emotions, so you feel free to express them. You take your time to express your emotions, and you let your feelings come out freely. And so now, how does emotional coping actually occur in the real world? Well, the individual matters and their disposition matters. So if you tell everyone to emotionally cope, some people just do not do as well emotionally coping for whatever factors. Maybe they just don't like expressing their emotions, and they're actually going to have not as good outcomes as other people. And also, culture matters. In some cultures, emotional coping is far different than we might say in the United States. For instance, what's appropriate and inappropriate to express is different in an Eastern context as opposed to a Western context. And so I found this really interesting, that a lot of Eastern cultures, how they utilize emotion is a lot of times with suppression, so not even emotional coping. And this is thought to be because of the need to fit in is so much stronger in each Eastern cultures, which we talked about in a previous lecture. And so this is really interesting because some of these Eastern cultures and some of these Eastern populations, they actually have a down regulation in their emotional centers of the brain, presumably because they have a tendency to suppress their emotions to sort of fit in with the group. And so what are some of the benefits of coping, emotional coping? Why would you want to emotionally cope in the first place? Well, there's a higher health outcomes for people who emotionally cope, and this has been seen primarily in cardiac stress. So after a cardiac event or a hospitalization, they're better able to recover by presumably lowering their stress, which is another reason you'd want to emotionally cope, is to reduce your stress. And so this has actually been studied in discrimination, where if you're able to emotionally cope and you're able to realize after an event of racism or discrimination that, hey, my in-group, whatever group I'm part of, Black, Asian, Hispanic, is actually okay, and I don't have to feel so bad about whatever happened. You can see an increase in self-esteem, life satisfaction, and feeling good about the group you're in, which is one of the benefits of emotionally coping. And so finally, I want to talk about emotional storytelling. And so when we have a very intense and overwhelming experience, we often always share that information with someone close with us. And so this is seen after a traumatic event or an overwhelming emotion, we share that emotion up to 95% with the people around us. And so sharing these emotions has led researchers to think, what about if you write down your emotions and sort of share it secretly? Well, this has been shown in the Penny-Baker paradigm, which in writing your emotions actually increases a slew of positive effects, such as fewer physician visits and feeling less stressed overall. So this could just be by journaling and writing down your emotions. And so this actually worked the best for people who were very hostile or who had alexithymia, which is an inability to understand their emotional state, or like a really low EQ. It's not the exact same, but alexithymia is kind of an inability to feel emotions. And so if you journal and you're hostile or alexithymic, you'll actually see more benefits from journaling and writing your emotions than others. And this is also a great way for people to, writing is a great way for people to understand what other people are seeing, because we see in a lot of research, instead of asking people individually how they're feeling, they can look at journals and then sort of get an inference of their emotional state and do studies on that based on what they actually say. And that was explored in the last lecture. And so I thank you guys for watching this video, and I made a Discord if anyone is interested in giving me feedback or giving me video suggestions. So feel free to comment below with any suggestions you have and join the Discord. Thank you.